Now, in order to make the most of this widget's controls, we will have to do one more thing that I cannot set up from the widget itself, which is add a post-processing material to our scene. So we will go and find our post-process volume, unless if it hasn't already been created. And then we can scroll down to where it says rendering features, and there's an option called post-process material. For that, we will hit add array, choose to do an asset reference, and find the material called widget post-processing material. Add that to it, and what this now lets us do is do things like change our scene's brightness, tint our scene in any color we would like, and furthermore, we can also use this to desaturate our scene. So if I use the slider, you can see that it grays everything out. And this can be especially useful if you're trying to create a certain effect, especially if you combine it with brightness and other post-processing effects such as fall off distance, fog, depth of field, and a number of other things. A quick and easy way to change the vibe of the scene without doing much. So let me reset that. One of the properties I've got and one of the options I have is a material that you can use for blending between materials. You can either do it in a triplanar way, which tries to apply it to any object regardless of its UV mapping, which can be very useful for non-UV mapped objects or just objects within Unreal already. You can see that, for instance, if I take this cube and I say apply triplanar blend material, that'll apply it, and I can blend from material A to material B. In this case, our displacement is too much, but once we have it reduced, you can see that it goes from one to the other. This here is also, there's also one used that is not triplanar mapped and is set for normal UV tiling, and that is the one up here. I've already applied it to my pavilion, where you can now see I can blend from state A all the way into state B, as well as adjusting metalness, roughness, specularity, or even the brightness of the material itself. And now go over here and let's take a look at some of the spawnable items that we've got in our little widget. So in this case, let's say I want to start off by creating a crater. Let me put that down a little bit. And if I'm happy with that, sure, but we can of course also do things such as mess with the amount of displacement that it has and saturation, which is not so important here, but for instance, if we had the crater number 2, which is more of a dirt looking crater, and you didn't want it to be as saturated, then you could mess around with it here. And of course, like we said, displacement, amount, and direction, all of this is controllable from within this area. Now, crater on its own doesn't do much, so let's say we want to add some smoke, and that's looking alright. We can still add some steam, which is a lighter version of it. Maybe offset that a tiny bit. And if we want to have a slightly larger area effect, then we can still add the fog. And the fog is just a whole lot bigger, and it also carries a bit further by how it's been designed. So where there's smoke, there's fire, so I'll still add fire, and boom, we now have a relatively cool little crater with flames and smoke and all that. The next thing you can do, let's pull this over here. Actually, no, let's stay here. We can now put some rebar down. Let me throw that here. We can have some intact rebar. We could do a rebar grid. These are both intact. Or we can do some damaged rebar, a mangled grid. And you know what? I'm relatively happy with that. That's pretty cool. from here on out, what can we do? This is actually a destroyed scene, so let's go here, and I want to add a large pile of bricks. So I'm gonna put that down there, and that's already looking pretty decent. But if I want additional items in the rubble, let's say like the rebar itself, we can now create a let's do a medium debris pile. This is essentially our bricks, but it already has a bit more decal damage as well as a number of rebar items added to it already. We could scale this a little bit if we wanted to, but it tends to be alright as is. If that pile of bricks is not big enough for you yet, we also have a massive pile of mixed debris, so I can spawn that here, and then maybe scale it a little bit, let's say like so, and like so. Make sure that it is scaling uniformly. And yes, these have been initially simulated and created using Cinema 4D, but you can also do this with Houdini, and also some scattering and simulation features here within Unreal itself, if you so choose. So this looks like a fairly convincing pile of something. Let me pull this down a little bit. Yeah. And so within a few clicks, we have quite the pile of debris. If we add this crater to it, maybe rotate this, pull that over here. Let's take this cube. Let's say this cube is the thing that did the damage, so we can apply our triplanar displacement map. It's looking pretty decent. If I want to get a little bit crazier with it, let's reduce our brightness a little bit. Maybe make it a bit more rough, or less rough, depending on what we wanted. And turn up our normal strength, maybe even increase the amount of displacement we've got, if that is suitable to our needs. And we can now place that down here. And we have our culprit for what has done all this damage. What else do we have? We can add we can add a column that already has some damage rebar in it if we want to do some quick manipulation of things. We can also add some small scattered debris, as you can see here, or we could add a medium pile. Oh wait, we already did that. We can do a little bit of scattered debris, just a few little shards here, left and right. From there, we can now go on to our mesh decals. So we can add a mesh decal here, and let me take this, rotate it, and put it down like so. Just a tiny bit. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. We can do the same for another one of these. Put that down like so. Maybe rotate it like that. Lower it down. Same goes, of course, for the next two as well. All of which currently are rotated in the wrong direction, but it is always fairly easy to fix that so that we can get the effect that we're looking for. And lastly, we can add our whole decal. Put that here. Maybe align it a little bit, be a bit more subtle. And if we don't want to have additional shading or shadows, we can always turn it on and off, as well as mess around with our materials opacity. If all these things are just a little bit too stark for us, and if the decals underneath are causing issues, we can still fade those in and out to our liking. So yeah, I'm happy with that. In fact, this is all looking relatively decent. Let me still add some damaged rebar. Put that there. And let's still add some fire, some fog, and some smoke. And I'm pretty happy with that. Let's still add maybe a little bit of medium debris and put that down into our scene just a little bit. And so within a few clicks, we've created a scene that would have otherwise taken a reasonable amount of time to create.